not seeing any, we will move to item number 2, and I ask our staff to stay available with us as there might be questions. The item 2 relates to, let's see, so item 2 relates to resolutions for code amendments and other actions relating to water forward, as well as other water-related conservation and reuse. So what I'd like to do, colleagues, is we have 3 proposals and some amendments, and so I thought we'd take up the proposal that I have put forward, and then the proposal that Councilmember Tovo has put forward, and then the proposal that Councilmember Fuentes has put forward, because those appear to me to be 3 distinct resolutions that we can bring forward. And as we do that, we'll take up the amendments that Councilmember Ellis has, as well as I think Councilmember Alter had some amendments. So I'm going to proceed that way, assuming that works for everyone. So Councilmember Fuentes.
Yeah, I think the resolution that I have, I think it could also go as an amendment to yours, Chair. But I'm just curious if you could just elaborate a little more on the distinction between the two.
It can be done either way. It doesn't really matter. I'm happy to take it as an amendment on my resolution, or if you want to bring it as a separate resolution. The way this works, so you'll understand, when a committee recommends resolutions, then it is put on the agenda under the committee's name. And so if we keep it separate, then you'll see 3 resolutions. If you want to combine it, then you'd see 2. So it's really up to you. I think that it works either way. Do you have a preference, or?
Yeah, I guess we could keep it as a separate resolution. That's fine.
Okay. Okay. I think that there's also, yeah, I think that makes sense to do that. Okay. All right, then I'm going to, Councilmember Ellis, did you have a point about that before?
Just going to make a point about what Vanessa just said. Sorry, Paige.
That's all right. I just wanted to make sure procedurally I understood. Is the intent to essentially take 3 different votes, or to talk about all 3 and then vote on all 3 together, or how?
Well, that's up to how y'all want to do it. I mean, I was going to lay them out separately. We can vote on them together if y'all would like, as a package. I'm happy to do that. Or we can vote on them separately. I think we have to lay them out like we would a resolution, but then, we can choose to vote on them all together if we want.
I think separately might make more sense, just in case people have certain nuances or, pros and cons with each one. It might make sense to keep them separate.
Okay. Councilmember Poole?
I was just going to suggest, if we keep Vanessa's separate from yours and Kathy's, we should explain to the dais when we bring the suite of them that it wasn't that any of them were necessarily in competition, but that each author of the different initiatives wanted to bring them themselves rather than putting them on. I mean, I don't want to characterize what we're going to do before we do it, but if that is the case, it would be helpful to the rest of the dais to understand why we have 3, not 2 or 1 coming out of it.
Yeah, they're all complementary, I think.
Right.
So.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay. Councilmember Tovo?
Yeah, I can lay this out. I mean, I can talk about this in the layout, but I think I don't serve on the committee, and so it was my intent to bring it forward as an IFC with feedback from you all and hopefully co-sponsorship from you all at the same time that the other 1 or 2 comes forward. So just to answer the question you raised, Councilmember Poole.
It would come as your resolution regardless, whether we put it under the committee as a recommendation or whether you post it separately. So you can, that's the way I've seen it done before. So it maintains the fact that you are the sponsor, I guess is what I'm saying. So okay, but you can think about that. So Okay, so I am going to, so we'll move each of these and then we'll take them up and then we'll decide if we're going to vote. I think Councilmember Ellis suggested we voted on them separately, so we can do that. So I'm going to move that the committee recommend to the council adoption of the water forward resolution that I've brought forward. And if we get a second, then I'll second from Councilmember Poole. And now let me just explain this one. So what this one does is this one is very, very specific and focused on bringing forward the three aspects of water forward that were part of the Code Next Land Development Code as far as we got with the Land Development Code. And these relate to water benchmarking and water balance calculations, to mandatory on-site water reuse system requirements by 2023, and to connecting the reclaimed water connection requirements. So just as a reminder to folks, those were the three items that were that there was language written into the Land Development Code revisions and voted on as part of those revisions as far as we got, which was only to the second reading on Code Next. I want to also just highlight that that as was referenced in the report from staff, the mandatory on-site water reuse system requirement picks up the third aspect of those recommendations. The first two have already been accomplished. The third aspect was that by 2023, that on-site water reuse systems is required for a large development project. The other two aspects that have already been accomplished was adopting the rules, to implement on-site water reuse. And then the other one, and that's the council adopted that in December, I believe. And then the other one was the incentive program for on-site water reuse, which our staff just reported to us the progress of that. And that's something that council's already adopted also. So, so with that said, I know that, I don't know, let's see, let me just ask our staff. I think that that moving forward with this is aligned with the path that the staff has been on in implementing the Water Forward Task Force recommendations, and it's aligned with their timeline for doing so. And is there anything that Director Masaris that you would like to add about that?
You're correct, Council Member. This is in alignment with the direction we've been taking, and I might ask Kevin or Marissa to elaborate on that if they'd have any other insights to pass on.
I would just say, the resolution as we've seen and the language therein, is very much consistent with, number one, the draft language that we submitted during the Land Development Code rewrite process that envisioned changes to what was then going to be Chapter 23. So yes, I think as we understand the resolution, it's very much aligned. Okay, and yes, what it does is it initiates amendments to the Land Development Code and ask that these ordinance adhere as closely as possible to the language that the council had already vetted. So the other thing that it does as its last be it resolved is it initiates an ordinance waiving the requirements for going back through the Planning Commission. Because these items have already been through the Planning Commission, it still requires a public hearing process. It doesn't waive that. It still requires a public hearing process. It's just that it would come back to council without having to go through the Planning Commission process again, since it's already been through that. So that's the second be it resolved.
So, Councilmember Ellis, I know you had some amendments that you wanted to make or you had one amendment I think you wanted to make to this item. You want to speak to that?
I did. Thank you very much. And I want to make sure on the Word doc that was sent out, I had my settings on simple markup and it did not show some stricken language. And so I just wanted to daylight for people reading that to see that. I did want to strike the language about skipping the Planning Commission process in 25-1-502. And it's only a simple adjustment because it's been 2 years since we approved the May 2nd direction of 2019. It's been 1 year since it went to the Planning Commission. We do know that how we're able to build, what we're able to build, materials cost has changed quite a bit over that time. And we do have two new colleagues on the dais. And so I would like to give their planning commissioners an opportunity to weigh in on this too. So I hope that would be seen as agreeable. And then I wanted to add language, an additional be it resolved, further resolved, that says the city manager is directed to provide recommendations to mitigate the impacts to affordability of these new building requirements. The recommendations shall be developed with stakeholder input and brought back to council for consideration in conjunction with the above ordinances. And a little background on my thinking for that. I've always been supportive of Water Forward. When we wrapped it in with the LDC rewrite, the 1984 LDC rewrite, which was very different from the Code Next process that I was not involved in, I voiced my concerns that we could somehow inadvertently tie these processes up together. I think everyone at that time wanted to move it forward and just wanted to move it forward in the best way possible to make sure land development rewrite lawsuit and the Water Forward practices of the water utility and development services were not going to conflict with each other. But I've always been happy to move water forward. That's tricky to say. But we also need to understand that the city is experiencing an affordability and water conservation crisis. Building costs have never been higher. Displacement is sweeping out residents. Fewer young families can afford to buy, and our seniors are struggling to age in place, and rents are increasing too. Given the inevitability of climate change, implementing Water Forward is critical. There's no argument there. We need to do everything we can to conserve and reuse our precious water supplies as best we can. However, we must be careful that we're not fixing one problem and creating another. So we do need to find solutions that both improve our water system's resilience and help address our affordability crisis. It is essentially what this amendment asks staff to do, is to provide recommendations that will mitigate or identify other possible solutions to affordability that might come from adding other development regulations. So I do hope they are friendly. I know along the way we've talked about these particular components of Water Forward, given that there are so many others that our task force is currently working on and currently implementing, and we're so glad that those commissioners are willing and able to serve in this capacity. But I have been concerned about the legal implications since it's wrapped up in the rewrite lawsuit. And the affordability components that I just spoke about. So I'm fully supportive of trying to get everything with Water Forward that we possibly can, but no, there's some trickiness to policy writing that we just need to make sure we're taking a calculated and balanced approach to.
Oh, well, thank you, Councilmember Ellis. Let's take the two pieces of it. I'd like to take it separately. I can accept as friendly the language around affordability, understanding that it's my understanding that's already been part of the process that the staff has done. And it would be part of the process in bringing it forward to us as a public hearing. So the other aspect, I cannot support language, so that I'd like to vote that separately. Councilmember Alter, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm just confused because I don't believe that what you read is what was sent to us. So I'm not sure that I'm following exactly what the language is. I had sent an amendment for Kitchen's resolution that had to do with affordability. It felt like there were two different things that were read, and I just want to make what we're talking about is, because you started talking about the strikeouts, and the strikeouts also strike out, I see it, the part about initiating an ordinance. being waived. And so I don't know. I'd like to better understand what is before us.
Okay, so Councilman Ellis, can you, as I understand it, there are Councilmember Ellis is proposing two different things, and I'm asking that we consider them separately. One of them is to delete the last be it resolved that I have put forward regarding the waiver, and that's what I'd like to take that up separately. The second one is her language around affordability. Do you want to read that language again, Councilmember Ellis, so we can be clear?
Yes, I'm happy to, and it is quite similar to another amendment that I sent around for Councilmember Tobos. So make sure the one that says Councilmember Kitchen on it is the one that we're looking at. But the language to be added would say the city manager is directed to provide recommendations to mitigate the impacts to affordability of these new building requirements. The recommendation shall be developed with stakeholder input and brought back to council for consideration in conjunction with the above ordinances.
Does that answer the question, Councilmember Alter?
Okay, so the strikeout is to the last be it resolved, not the first sentence of the first be it resolved. Right. Sorry. Okay. And then you want to separate the questions and between what's being deleted and the affordability.
Yes.
Is the stakeholder input part of the deletion, or is it part of the affordability piece as you're separating it?
I would say the affordability piece.
Well,
there's two sentences in the part that was added.
Mm-hmm.
I was suggesting we take up all of what the two sentences together that are being added. And I have a question for staff about it.
Okay. I'll see. I'll ask.
Councilmember Poole first.
So I don't know what the real wisdom is to sending this item back through the various commissions when it is the same, absent these amendments that was considered previously. So unless the intention is to slow down the implementation of Water Forward, because it will slow it down. The other thing I would like to hear from Councilmember Ellis is if it comes back that Water Forward negatively affects affordability, let's just say that it did, does that mean that you would no longer support Water Forward?
I just think we should go through the due diligence of letting our newly appointed planning commission. We have two new colleagues, Councilmember Fuentes, Councilmember Kelly. I think it's important for this commission as it stands, the new planning commission, to be able to weigh in on this, given that quite a bit of time has lapsed. It's not an effort to slow things down. As I spoke about earlier, I think we're all trying to move it forward. We're just trying to understand all the components and angles of it before moving something that is written into something tied up in the lawsuit, to try to pull that out and to change that. And so we are all trying to move it forward. I've been supportive of moving it forward the whole time, and the planning commission meets every 2 weeks. So I don't see this as a high burden to just trying to do this and have some due diligence to the public input process.
This does not affect the notice and petition rights aspects of the lawsuit. That actually is not an accurate statement. But how then would you choose if you did get an answer back from the city manager that staff said that this would increase costs for building, but they wouldn't be able to pull them apart from the increased costs that are happening anyway because of the supply chain and the local economy and the global economy, then would you choose not to move forward with these policy changes that we've been and staff have been working on for quite a long time and say, no, we're not going to do them because in your estimate, based on what the city manager is showing you, you have decided that it would negatively affect affordability, and if so, what affordability? Because these are long-term investments. These are long-term investments, and they always look like they're really expensive at the front end. But in fact, have really positive effects
Can I answer? I'm
And-
sorry.
and
It
just
seems
to
like there's more.
Councilmember Paul, let's let
Just-
Councilmember Ellis answer this.
I just wanted to complete my sentence, that sometimes we have to make larger investments at the front end because they have mitigating and helpful economic impacts later on. And then just to reiterate that the zoning, this is not a zoning issue, which is why it's in a different chapter. And it is not, in fact, tied up in the litigation, the Soifer ruling litigation.
Just to clarify, it simply says provide recommendations to mitigate. It just says provide recommendations to mitigate. I don't know how much more clear I can be.
Okay, I have a question. So, I have a question. I'm sorry.
About assessment. Okay, just looking for a value. I just kind of wanted to understand your amendment and to get to the motivation behind it. Go ahead, Chair.
Oh, okay, I have a question of staff. Can you speak to us about what evaluation that you had done in the past about affordability of these items as part of your process, as part of your water forward process analysis?
So, Kevin Crittenden, I think really, let me ask Marisa first to kind of answer that, and then I'll follow on there.
Okay, so just for some background, when we were originally evaluating strategies like on-site reuse or centralized reclaim, we developed cost estimates for all these strategies, and that was incorporated as part of the whole planning process. For on-site reuse in particular, those cost estimates were developed by our consultant, GHD. They have a significant amount of experience with on-site reuse in Australia. So overall, though, I would just add that the timing of the implementation of these strategies, especially if we hew closer to the language as was included within the LDC, allows us some time to look at affordability and cost of the on-site reuse strategies. So the mandate is not is anticipated to be implemented in 2023, or 3 years after the implementation of our on-site water reuse rules. And the goal of having this incentivized period for on-site water reuse is for us to be able to have some pilots where we can develop cost data. We can gather that information and understand the affordability implications, and we can kind of work with that too, just as different discussions have mentioned, kind of develop some recommendations and thoughts around how we can mitigate those types of affordability impacts. The incentive program is intended to end at the point where we would be mandating that these buildings, have these systems on site, but it's that testing period that allows us to gather the data. So the implementation timeline there really works out with us being able to evaluate those affordability impacts.
So am I hearing you that the incentive process that you're going through right now and the incentive period will provide you with information that can help you think about mitigating cost at the point that it becomes, at the point that it would become mandatory in 2023? Is that what you were saying?
That's the goal, yes, for us to have several projects on the private side for us to gather that information.
Okay. All right. So, okay. So so I have a suggestion. So Councilmember Ellis, I'm wondering if you would be okay with your language and then just striking in conjunction with the above ordinances, because my thought is that I appreciate the effort to bring back recommendations to mitigate the impacts of affordability, and I think that that's a good part of this process, an important part of this process. But I'm hearing that that is going to have to happen as part of this testing period that they're in right now with the incentives. And so they're not going to be finished with that by the time the ordinance comes back to us. So would you consider that to work for what you're trying to get at? If we keep the language related to bringing us back recommendations about mitigating the impacts of affordability, but not requiring all those recommendations to come back to us at the time that the ordinance comes back to us. I'm sure they may have some preliminary kinds of recommendations, but they might not be finished. That's the concern that I have.
I completely see where you're coming from on that. I wonder if it could say in conjunction with implementation of the changes, just so it was
Yeah.
less tied to the ordinances and more tied to the process.
Yeah, I think that works. From a staff perspective, that seems to align with what you're, okay. So it would say in conjunction with implementation of the above ordinances. Okay.
Yeah, I'm completely comfortable with that.
All right,
Thank you for that.
With that language, I can take that as friendly. Councilmember Poole, do you have a concern?
I think that amendment is a good one as well. Thank you,
Okay.
Councilmember Ellis.
Okay, any objections to taking that as a friendly amendment? Okay, I don't see any objections. So the second thing then is, let's talk about the second piece, Councilmember Ellis. I think it is important to, and that's why I would like to keep the waiver language and the purpose behind it. When you go back to the commission review process, it's not just the planning commission. It has to go back to a subcommittee of ordinances of the planning commission and then to the planning commission. And they have several public hearings they have to do, and then they make a recommendation, and then it comes to us and we do another public hearing. And so there are multiple steps along the way for public input. And I think it would have the effect of slowing down the process. I also don't think it's necessary because the council just considered this language very recently. And I understand that there are new planning commission members, but I don't think that we need to send everything back through the planning commission again. Because so I'd like to keep that provision. We can vote on that if you'd like, but I can't accept that as a friendly amendment. Do other people have any comments or questions that they'd like to say about that part of it before we vote? Is there anything else you want to say, Councilmember Ellis, about that?
I can just say I'd much prefer to follow that public input process. I do see where you're coming from. If there's a few meetings that it would have to be at.
Yeah.
As long as it's legal for us to do that, which
Yeah.
like you've probably vetted, I'm okay with keeping it in.
Okay.
I'd prefer more public input opportunities, but I understand where you're coming from on it.
Okay. All right, we'll keep it in. So let's see, we were going to vote on these separately. So let's go ahead and take a vote on this one, and then we'll move to the next one. So all in favor of recommending this to the full council for adoption?
And this is your item, right?
Yeah, this is my item.
Her item as amended.
As amended, sorry, as amended.
As amended. I might rather just abstain because of the planning commission process, but
Okay.
really appreciate the friendly amendments and the discussion on it.
Okay. All right, so now we'll move to the second one. That passed 4, I think. 4 with 1 abstention. Okay. Councilmember Tovo, do you want to lay yours out?
Yes, thanks.
Before she does that, can I just, before Kathy
I'm
does
sorry.
that, I just want to clarify for anyone who's watching that Councilmember Tovo doesn't serve on the committee, and so she's not,
Right.
she's not on the committee, not because she's not voting, but she's an active in Water Forward. I think she might have set off the task force in the first place, and has graciously decided to make her resolution part of our water committee discussion so we can be more coherent about moving this forward.
Thank you, Councilmember Alter. It's an very important part. Okay, Councilmember Tovo, you want to go ahead?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that. And yes, I did do the resolution that sort of started the task force and then started the integrated water management plan that became Water Forward. And so most of you, I think, on this committee know that Shannon Halley on my staff is an amazing resource and has really done all kinds of great work in this area. And so I appreciate all of the work that she's done with regard to all of those efforts. So the resolution I'm bringing forward, and it will likely have some tweaks here and there. I'm going to do some edits here and there to what you see before you, and also clarify some of the direction toward the end. But this is very much in line with both what Councilmember Kitchen is moving forward with her resolution, and also with the staff's presentation about some of the priorities that they've been focusing on and some of the work that they have underway. And really, I would say, I know that we're running kind of behind, or that y'all are running kind of behind today, so I'll keep it really quick. You know, it is imperative that we do everything we can to reduce our water usage and really focus on conservation. And so the direction here to our staff and to our task force is to take a look at the Water Forward recommendations, in particular the ones that are bulleted here: dual plumbing, expansion of current reclaimed water system connections, which is also in Councilmember Kitchen's water benchmarking, and in particular the landscape transformation ordinances and the irrigation efficiency and incentive program, to see what among those concepts that were the recommendations that came forward from Water Forward are low-hanging fruit. What can we do sooner than had been laid out on that implementation schedule? Because we know we are in need and in a time of climate change, potentially going to be really facing some drought conditions again. And so that is the intent here. Again, to really consider implementing any additional strategies that we can sooner rather than later, so that we can really do our best, put ourselves in the best position to protect our water supply.
Okay, does someone want to move Councilmember Tovo's resolution? Councilmember Alter? And do we have a second? Councilmember Ellis. Okay, now I think there were some amendments. Councilmember Alter, you had an amendment, and then Councilmember Ellis.
Actually, I just had a couple of typo things that I wanted to flag so they don't move forward. I will just add, I forgot to mention it, that on, I think it was page 4 of Councilmember Kitchen's, the very bottom, it refers to items B1 have been. It would probably be useful to have the code reference to which B1 it was there. Okay, so for Councilmember Tovo's, I appreciate this resolution. These are just tiny, minor nothings, but I don't know how else to do that given the way that we're doing this. So in the 6 whereas, I think it should be adopted rather than adopts. But maybe
Yes,
that's
thank you, perfect. And
basis
I am
we do
slowly
that.
but surely changing adopts to approves.
Okay.
And so but thank you, I'm going to say approved. Thank you
That's
so much.
fine.
And I always appreciate these kinds of, this kind of feedback, so thank you.
And then there's a whereas that says associated with changes storage levels. I think it should be in storage levels.
Okay, I'll make a note. I don't immediately see that one, but I'll find it. Thank you.
That is the 8th whereas the document provides triggers for the initiation of drought stages associated with changes. Should be in storage levels.
Yes, thank you.
And there's a whereas clause on page 3. It's the second one you can see on page 3, where it says whereas according a 2021 report, it should be according to.
Yeah, that one I caught, but not the others. So thank
Sorry,
you.
I just
No,
thought we'd want
this is
those
great.
fixed. So those are very minor. And to the extent that you're moving this forward, I'd be pleased to co-sponsor.
Great, thank you very much. And thanks
To
again
navigate.
for pointing out those
with the process.
those issues. Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Ellis, I think you had an amendment.
Thank you. Yes, and this is very similar even to the amended language that we worked out on your resolution, Chair Kitchen. It's just an extra be it resolved that says the city manager is directed to provide recommendations to mitigate the impacts to affordability of these water forward strategies. The recommendations shall be developed with stakeholder input and brought back to council for consideration on a timeframe that aligns as closely as possible with implementation of the above strategies. So I think that's almost identical to what Chair Kitchen amended my other language on hers to read. So I hope that's seen as friendly.
Councilmember Tovo, do you want to comment on that, or?
I guess I would just say, you know, in this case, we're not initiating the code amendments. We're asking, I mean, what we're in essence asking is for the manager to consult with the Austin Water staff and with the task force regarding the implementation. And so that it already is a stakeholder process, and that's consistent also with the water forward implementation recommendations to include it within a task force. So I don't know what it would do to the time frame. I mean, I guess to me again, we're asking stakeholders to provide that feedback. So I'm not sure why I need to understand really why the recommendations being developed with stakeholder input is relevant here. One, the recommendations have already been developed with extensive stakeholder input, and now we're saying, please take another look at them with an eye to which ones can move forward on a quicker time frame. I mean, that stakeholder input has already happened to a great extent, and so that's. I mean, I guess you're talking about recommendations to mitigate the impacts on affordability. You know, I leave it to the committee. Again, I'm not sure whether that's kind of what I have to say on this. I'm not sure how relevant it is to this particular resolution.
Okay, so Councilmember Ellis, explain your thought here in regards to this. So in the context of the way that Councilmember Tovo has set this out, what are you thinking that you'd like to see with regard to the affordability with this one?
I just think it would be helpful for there to be some sort of understanding of mitigating affordability issues regarding these, as I had previously mentioned, just as time goes on and as we go by year to year implementing what is a great plan, talking about these last pieces in particular, I think could be helpful to have an eye on mitigating affordability impacts as well. So if it makes more sense in the language of the resolution to go with the first sentence, since as Councilmember Tovo explained, there's already other mentions of the Water Forward Task Force, which we all know is doing great work. I'm happy to move forward with just the nod to coming back to council with those recommendations so that we can weigh them at the same time.
So what you're talking about is coming back with recommendations related to affordability at the same time that you're bringing back recommendations with regard to what to move forward with. Is that okay? Does staff have any comment they want to make on any of that, or?
I think that's pretty consistent. I think we're good.
Okay. All right, Councilmember Alter.
Thank you. I think that, makes sense to move forward with the first part. I mean, as I'm understanding it, that has been very much part of the process. But part of the reason that we're trying to make sure we take all these steps for the water supply is because that is also key to affordability kind of over the long run. So I'm comfortable with this is like, as you're putting this together, keep in mind if you tweak it this little way or you tweak it a little that way, it might have a big, impact on affordability or trying to phase something in a particular way or something like that, to me is consistent. But I don't want us to lose the notion that we have to pursue these strategies to secure the water supply, which is fundamental in my view for affordability. And I'm not saying you're suggesting it. I just want to clarify that that's how I'm interpreting kind of what we're talking about here. It is not a license to say these are not strategies that we need to
Oops, I think
Councilmember Ellis suggested earlier, mitigate it, should those, exist and be easy to adopt.
okay. Okay, so what if I'm hearing you right, you are making it friendly to your amendment? Take the first sentence relating to affordability. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, and I
It's
might
not my
just say
amendment, it's Councilmember.
I'm sorry, not your amendment, your, I'm sorry. I'm getting my processes messed
It was
up.
Councilmember Tova's base resolution, so she would have to
Yes.
determine whether it was friendly. I was just clarifying,
Okay.
making sure that I understood the intention of the amendment as amended and what that meant in terms of the direction that we were providing, given the subject of Councilmember Tova's resolution.
Okay.
That sounds good to me. And a small tweak I might make if the first sentence is what's being put in is just to add city manager is directed to provide to council, just so it's got that specifier in there in that first sentence.
Okay. Can you read it to us just so we're making sure we're understanding?
Would now say the city manager is directed to provide to council recommendations to mitigate the impacts to affordability of these water forward strategies.
Okay. Councilmember Tovo, is do you consider that friendly?
Well, and this is, I guess, here's the awkwardness, right? I mean, I'm bringing it forward to the full council, and it may be a little different than the one that you guys are talking about. And so I'll consider the fact that you're adding this amendment here today. I'm not voting on it here today because I'm not on the committee, and what you all vote on may or may not be exactly the same as what I bring forward. Let me just talk for a minute about affordability. I think what starts, I certainly appreciate the concern, Councilmember Ellis, and the desire to have that become part of the conversation. And it, as Councilmember Alter, I think, indicated, it certainly has been as part of the water forward conversations. Were I to add something like this to the resolution that goes to council, I would talk about it a little bit differently, because it really needs to be looked at in terms of both affordability, in terms of the initial development, as well as kind of the long-term, the impact on over the long term for residents. So those upfront infrastructure costs are going to help tenants and property owners save, on their water bills over the long term. And it also, I'm not sure, it would need to be a really well crafted study of affordability to be able to measure our water conservation methods against the cost of securing water rights, additional water rights, if we are in a situation where we need to. So, just talking about affordability doesn't really capture all of those nuances. So I just throw that out there for, if you notice hesitation on my part, that's part of why, because there are it really is all of those considerations. I know when we were considering the possible need for the city to contract with additional water providers, those come at quite a cost. And so that would need to be measured against the cost of doing these infrastructure. But anyway, thanks for the conversation.
My suggestion is that we make our motion, that we move forward out of this committee with the inclusion of the sentence that Councilmember Ellis is proposing. We understand, and the way this works is when a committee brings something forward, and of course, as Councilmember Tovo said, she intends to bring an IFC also. There's further discussion at the council level. So, and we understand, Councilmember Tovo, that you may tweak the language some, and that's fine. So, if that's all right with everybody, could we vote on it that way, or would you prefer not? Councilmember Poole?
Yeah, I just want to emphasize again what I said previously about infrastructure projects being a big cost at the front end, and they have a long tail of affordability elements, which is why we do them in the first place. And specifically with Water Forward, knowing that the region is growing as fast as it is, and we can't make more water. So we have to be really mindful about how we use it and conserve it or not conserve it, which was my, frankly, my really serious and deep concern, that there would actually be a point at which we would say no to Water Forward and conservation because it looked like it was not going to be affordable, however you define it, in the short term. Because my view is way long, and our view on the council has to be far into the future. The short-term stuff is great too. We have to be mindful of that, but the longer term is what we are building for. And so if we're going to have any kind of rhetoric in here about affordability, it has to be crafted in a way that acknowledges that upfront costs are going to be big, like Project Connect, massive upfront costs, but the long tail of that far into the future is going to be immensely helpful financially and economically to whoever is in this city. So if we could just kind of internalize that kind of philosophical approach and public policy approach, then I think we can both signal that we are concerned fiscally, but we also recognize that sometimes we have to, often governmental entities have to make a large investment at the front end in order to reap the benefits and the financial benefits later on. So I am a little bit, so I'm cautious about the amendment that is coming from Councilmember Ellis. Is there a way, would you like to maybe think about the affordability piece and give it a little more context so it's clear that it's not just the front end costs that you're concerned about? If that is indeed the case.
I have a suggestion, Councilmember Poole, unless you want to respond to that, Councilmember Ellis.
I just think, lowercase affordability is not overly prescriptive. And so I certainly see what you're saying, that some investments are necessary to make to ensure our resilience as a city. So I don't think I'm being overly prescriptive about what that affordability is or what it looks like, just to think about it.
I think I have a suggestion. My suggestion is that this has been a really good discussion, and it's been a good discussion for us to have. But Councilmember Tovo has already indicated that she intends to bring it as a separate IFC. So, we don't have to vote on this today. We can just consider this a good discussion and move on. And so, would y'all like to do that instead, or would y'all like to vote? I couldn't. From Councilmember Tovo, Councilmember Tovo, do you want the committee to try to act on this, or no? I wasn't sure what direction.
Entirely up to you all.
Okay, all right. Then my suggestion is, go ahead, Councilmember Ellis.
I was just going to suggest, since Councilmember Tova has indicated about bringing another IFC, would it be helpful if we approved what we've been working on? And I don't know the process of if she's doing an IFC that she finds is different enough that maybe we postpone it or withdraw it once it goes to full council. I've never approached this question before, so I don't know if it's more helpful to approve it this way and just to have it as backup just in case, or how that's best to make sure we don't shut any doors if this could be useful and then the council can still, work on it together. I don't quite know.
All right, Alter, and then Councilmember Poole.
I think we should leave it to Councilmember Tovo whether she wants us to vote on it today or not. I think it was really useful to have the discussion as part of the broader questions on Water Forward, and to have the opportunity, if we needed it, for the staff to be able to provide feedback so we can know that the direction that she's going. And I'm looking forward to co-sponsoring it to make sure that direction is what staff thinks is feasible and getting done. But I I would love that our committees had the imprimatur, that it really made an enormous difference if our committees supported it. But since that's not the reality we live in, I don't know that it impacts things majorly either way.
All right, well, let's move on then. Councilmember Poole?
Yeah, I was going to say, given the fact that Councilmember Tovo worked really hard to get it to the committee and brought it and explained it and laid it out and everything, I would like us to, I actually would like us to go ahead and vote on it. And if she was thinking, I think, Kathy, didn't you mention you were thinking about having the committee be co-sponsors on the item? Did I hear that
I
right?
can't have all of the committee because there are too many of you. So certainly I invite as many of you as would like to be on, up to the number of subquorum to participate as co-sponsors. And I've already talked to a couple of you on that front.
So what I was going to suggest is maybe if we vote it through and if Councilmember Ellis wanted to join as a co-sponsor, then she could work directly with Kathy on the kind of language that she wanted to see that captured the more global concerns that the future concerns that I've expressed and that others have expressed, and then we could actually have the support of the committee behind it when it gets to the full dais.
I'm happy to help in review language. I just feel like I'm really out of my wheelhouse and don't see a lawyer on about subquorums. And I know this is a public meeting and the information's been publicly posted. We also have the message board to work on too. So it doesn't mean that we won't be able to look at this in whatever subquorum Councilmember Tovo has and to be able to have this conversation publicly and provide some input, whether it's friendly acceptance or something that needs further discussion. I think that's a creative idea. I just am very worried we might be in the deep end on how to work through these things.
Councilmember?
Thank you. I just wanted to share that I'm ready to move forward and would be interested in taking a vote on this item, and want to thank Councilmember Tobo for bringing this forward. I definitely feel an urgency with moving forward on the water forward plan, and certainly I would be supportive of us taking a vote today.
Okay, all right, so let's go ahead and take a vote. We have a resolution and an amendment to that resolution on the floor. So let's take a vote on Councilmember Ellis's amendment first, and then the resolution itself. That makes sense? Okay. All in favor of adding the language related to affordability at this point that Councilmember Ellis has mentioned? Okay. So it'll be added. All in favor of passing the resolution, and again, that's it passes on as a recommendation to the full council to adopt it. Okay. All right, thank you. So that passes unanimously. All right, thank you, Councilmember Tobo. We really appreciate your work on this, and appreciate you bringing it to us to consider. So.
Well, thank you all. Thanks for the support.
Okay, Councilmember Fuentes, would you like to make a motion first and get it seconded, and then lay out your resolution?
Sure. I'd like to make a motion to move forward with this resolution that seeks to address the increased need for flood protection along with water supply needs.
Okay. Do you have a second? Second from Councilmember Ellis. Okay.
Wonderful. So with this resolution, we're looking at specifically the on-site reuse of stormwater as an economic and environmental benefit to address both water supply and flood management. It incorporates strategies from the Water Forward Plan, which relates to uses of water, including rainwater, stormwater, and the addition of wastewater. And it hones in on the recommendation from the Water Forward Plan to develop ordinances that require new, larger commercial and multifamily buildings use of alternative water generated on site. It pulls from the proposed LDC update around redevelopment requirements around stormwater management. And this is important, as you all know, because older commercial, industrial, and multifamily developments that lack adequate provisions for managing stormwater And this is especially important to my district here in Southeast Austin, given our history of catastrophic flooding events that we've had here in Austin that resulted in the loss of life and having hundreds of families displaced. So it's a priority for the district. So in short, this resolution, similar to the ones or to Councilmember Kitchen's, really, is honing in on the need to increase flood protection and would set that in motion through directing the city manager to come back or to do the alternative water ordinance and incentives option, which is outlined in the water forward plan. Also looking at community stormwater harvesting and assessing existing needs for rainwater harvesting at multifamily units.
All right. Thank you so much for bringing this. I think it's really important, and I appreciate the work that you've done focusing on flood protection. And this really takes us to another level on that. So rather than just being responsive, working towards being preventive. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Councilmember Alter.
So I just saw this right before we start, so I haven't had a chance to really dive into it. So I agree with the problem and the need to address the flood protection and we have an increased need. I'm just curious from staff what you would take this as providing you direction to do that you're not already doing, or does this accelerate or focus attention on the water forward? Please. I just want to make sure I understand it, jumping into it, only having just gotten it. So
I'll start, and we just got it too, and so I think we're trying to absorb the language a little bit. I think water forward and on-site reuse, has always envisioned rainwater capture, stormwater runoff aspects of water forward as part of reuse. I don't know other aspects of the proposed language and how much that pulls in other watershed ordinances that go beyond just water forward. I don't know if Kevin or Marissa have had a chance to reflect on this and have anything they would like to pass on right now.
I mean, I would say that, a couple of things. I mean, certainly water forward does identify stormwater capture and reuse as a potential strategy. So it's in the water forward plan as a potential strategy. Additionally, our recently passed regulatory framework for on-site reuse includes and envisions the opportunity to reuse stormwater on site. So, I mean, at some level, we've accommodated that. There are some more complicated aspects of trying to achieve co-benefits of stormwater capture to achieve, water quality protections and, flooding protections and water supply. I mean, just by the nature, I mean, for holding, reservoirs to work, they basically need to be empty. So we are working with Watershed on kind of how do we find a way to better understand that co-benefit and how we could actually apply that in a more specific engineering context. So again, that I'm not sure that's particularly helpful, other than it is part of the plan. We are moving it forward. I'm not exactly sure what it would mean to kind of pick those up individually as it relates to this particular amendment.
Councilmember Fuentes.
Yeah, I think, and originally when we drafted this, it was proposed as an amendment to Councilmember Kitchen to tie it into redevelopment requirements for commercial developments and multifamilies. And so certainly it's to build off of that work, and I see it as complementary. And if anything, it just draws attention to the need to look at on-site reuse from the lens of flood protection and reducing flood risk. And so, but I'm happy to, if we bring it forward, or however we bring it forward, happy to add additional language to make it more specific. And then also we can pull in some of the language and recommendations that came out of the memo from the flood resilience resolution that we passed earlier this year.
Yes, that sounds good. Councilmember Alter, did you have your hand raised?
Yeah, I think that would be great. And then part of it is because I think it was meant as part of the other one. And so
Yeah, sorry.
I want it to make as much sense so that we're giving the clear direction. And so, you know, I would be happy, you know, to assist in doing that. Because I think the problem you're trying to address is fine. And either it could be shaped as an amendment to the one we just passed, and we just pass that amendment when this comes before council and we figure out how to put it in there. Or we write a separate resolution that builds out the focus for it. I just think it would be like, what I've learned is that the clarity that we provide staff affects the product that we get back. And I think this is an important enough issue to make sure we have as much clarity as possible so we can add things to protect people from the flooding, which I think is the goal that we all share. So I'll leave it to you, Councilmember Fuentes, on how you want to proceed, and I'm happy to assist with that. I'm a little bit, I feel like it doesn't do enough of what it could do, and I haven't had the time to think it through to add that. So I would suggest that we take a little more time to get it right or to make it an amendment to the other one.
I have some thoughts on it, but first, Councilmember Poole.
I was going to suggest that we amend the motion just to say that as an amendment to an item that we've already passed, and then move forward, and then so that it would be tied to the other action, and then maybe Councilmember Fuentes and Alter can work together and you know, build out the addition, if there's some additional insight that you want to bring to what Councilmember Fuentes is bringing. But I think we can easily pass this as with the motion saying as an amendment to the previous item that we passed.
I think what it does is it might even make more sense. Yeah, I think it fits, because basically what you're asking is that, if I'm understanding correctly, is you're asking that that as part of considering implementation of these particular aspects of Water Forward related to you know, that we look at the increased flood protection. So, for example, your second bullet is examination of implementation issues for community stormwater harvesting. And so that's a very specific ask and really what I think you're doing is you're asking that you examine the implementation issues for community stormwater harvesting from this perspective that it adds to or addresses increased need for flood protection. So that's pretty specific, and so is assessment of existing needs for rainwater harvesting multifamily sites, another example. So I think it makes sense as it is. It could just add some language about, you know, do this as part of your implementation and bring back a report to council. It might just need language like that. So, in other words, it's because it's asking the city manager to address these items, but it doesn't have a report back or a next step specifically. Councilmember Alter, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I just think your comments are really helpful. So this is basically saying we have Water Forward, which is our water supply plan, but there are things that are in that are strategies that have implication for flood protection, and while you're implementing those, why we want you to take care of we want you to integrate the flood protection benefits into those strategies. Is that part of the direction?
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, Councilmember Alter. I really want to make sure this policy area is very important. And so when we drafted it, it was drafted as an amendment to Councilmember Kitchen's resolution. And so I think what I would like to do is either pass it as an amendment to Councilmember Kitchen's resolution.
Okay.
And then work with you on really rounding out the flood resilience and flood protection, increasing flood protection. Or just withdraw it and come back once we have some, tighter language. So
Let's do I would suggest we just adopt it as amendment to my resolution and then we'll go from there. Because I think it's really important and it's nice to carry all these together, I think. So I would suggest we do that. Does that make sense to everybody? And then, we can all work on the language and contribute to the language. Okay. All right.
So the motion then is to adopt this item as an amendment to your item.
That's right.
Send all three. Oh, yeah. Okay, cool.
Okay. All right. All in favor of that? All right. Passes unanimously. Okay. Okay, everybody. Now we're moving to the last item. Thank you for all that work. That was good conversation and discussion from everyone. So thank you. So